we can support both him and Kristen, and then also to answer some questions that have been coming up from the congregation over the last couple of weeks. So I will start off with asking him questions, and then Dan will respond. And then from there, we'll open up a question session to anybody else on the floor for questions you may have that were not answered. Okay? All right. Well, with that
Clear
said,
as mud, everybody. You got it.
all right, good morning, Pastor Dan. As you know, most working folks don't really get to take a sabbatical. They might get vacation time and sick leave, but not a sabbatical. Are sabbaticals a pretty regular thing for pastors, and why is this necessary or even useful for a pastor? Isn't this just kind of like a long vacation?
Just start with a softball for me, right there. You know, she has a good point. Sabbaticals really were born out of and have been a part of the church life and the university life mostly, but you have to remember that universities grew out of the church. You know, Thomas Aquinas was the theologian who really is credited with starting what we think of as the University of Higher Learning. And so the sabbaticals that professors might take for production purposes now would have started more as an opportunity to remove themselves from the daily rhythms and habits in order to focus intensely on one subject matter, to regroup and recalibrate. I don't know, Sam, did you ever get a sabbatical as a professor? How many times did you get to go on sabbatical?
I didn't count them. 2 or 3.
Two or three over his career. And so it's not abnormal still in the academic sphere, but in the academic sphere now, what's the phrase I'm looking for? The kind of operatus mundi, or whatever how you say that. The mode of operation is publish or perish, right? And so in academic circles, you either are publishing or you're going to lose your job in your tenure track. In churches, sabbaticals had fallen out of favor historically. That's not because they weren't needed or weren't necessary. What pastors did instead of getting a sabbatical from their churches was they quit and they got a break. They either left the church they were at and took 3 months between churches, or they just left ministry altogether. Pastoral ministry is a unique vocation in that there's a lot of responsibility for the spiritual, emotional well-being of the people that you serve. And so when you grieve, I'm grieving with you. Every step of mourning that you go through, I'm with you in that. If you're depressed, I'm feeling that with you. I'm walking alongside you or trying to with you and your family in those moments. I'm on call 24/7. And so there's a lot of moments that require a chance to recharge. And every few years, I think healthy congregations provide their pastor a chance to step away, to completely recharge the battery and not just do the quick weekend turnaround recharge where you get 2 days, to try and really step away, rejuvenate themselves, come back renewed and ready to re-engage with their family of faith. And so the difference between, I would say, what we would think of as a sabbatical and a long vacation is that the sabbatical is an equipping for the next season. It's not just a break from the ordinary. It's meant to completely step out of ministry so that I can focus on my relationship with my wife, who has oftentimes in the last 7 years had to take a back seat in order to serve you. It's a chance to reconnect with God. So often I'm pouring out that I rarely get a chance to have the moment to pray myself. And so we are really building the whole summer around the theme of praying and playing, which I'm stealing from Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson would say often of Sabbath that any Sabbath rightly reserved is the chance to pray and play. He would say, praying is to the human soul what playing is to the human body. You know, it's our chance to experience a moment with God, a freedom with heaven and earth. And he would say the interesting thing about that is praying and playing are the two activities for which you can't get paid. You know, they're meant only, and yet, he says, they're meant and required to have a blessed life. That we have to pray and we have to play in order to experience the fullness of what it means to be human and in relationship with God. And so the chance this summer really is the hope is for me to step out and to spend an entire summer praying and playing. That's really the goal. And hopefully for you to get that chance too while I'm away.
Thank you, Dan. I know that I speak for all of us when I say that we just greatly appreciate how you walk alongside us and how we're grateful that you're committed to continuing to pray and play to be there for us in the long future. So now that we know why it's essential for you to take a sabbatical, I'm sure some may be wondering if they're expensive and how our church is able to provide you with this opportunity.
Yeah. Sabbaticals are as expensive as you want to make them to be. Like anything else, you can do them on the cheap. You can also have a little bit more freedom. We are fortunate because of the good work of the Sabbatical Support Team in helping write and craft an application through the Lilly Grant, the Lilly Foundation, which offers a grant for clergy renewal. Their whole point is exactly that, to play. Their motto is joy, not obligation. If you put something in your application that feels like obligation and not joy, then you're less likely to actually get your grant fulfilled. They granted us $50,000. First Baptist has won a $50,000 grant. They stipulate that $15,000, up to $15,000, can stay with you as a congregation to help offset the expenses of my absence. And also to provide opportunities for you all to play and pray together. So there's a bunch of activities that are for you in those two realms. And then $35,000 goes to Kristen and I in order to go play. And so we get to take a rather expensive sabbatical this summer, as opposed to what we would have done had we not gotten the grant. We would have kept it fairly inexpensive. That means for us opportunities to do things that I would call bucket list items, things I would probably never be able to afford without this grant, the gift of this grant. A trip to Alaska to fish, not ever would have probably been able to swing that trip financially. We'll get to do that this summer. Kristen and I will spend a week in Belize, very similar kind of thing. It's an opportunity that we may not have been able to swing otherwise, and so it's providing some opportunities like that. But most of it, we're going to live on a shoestring. I'll be sleeping in a tent next to a river somewhere and eating peanut butter sandwiches just like I would now if I go fishing in Wyoming. So a lot of it's really eaten up in those two trips. Yeah, Kristen was real thrilled when she heard that. She was like, "Oh yeah, sounds great, Dan." So we are fortunate. We are fortunate that we have received this grant that will allow us to both get some opportunities. On your end, what that means is, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you.
Well, you're answering our next question, where I was going to have you elaborate a little bit on some of the benefits of you taking the sabbatical and how does it also benefit our church. So you can go ahead.
Okay, there you go. So on our end, it's a lot of getting to travel together without time constraints. Even when I take a week off, I always feel the crunch to get back and get ready for the next Sunday. And I always say it takes me 3 days to disengage. I get 1 day of vacation, and then 3 days I start re-engaging whenever I go away. This allows us the chance to really go and play. We're going to do a lot of fishing, camping, seeing family. I've talked about Eugene Peterson a lot. There's a part of the sabbatical that's built in where I'm considering it a spiritual pilgrimage. He grew up in a small town in northern Montana, close to Glacier National Park on Flathead Lake. We're gonna travel up there and explore Eugene Peterson's home area. I'm gonna spend a few days there in Glacier and around the lake and get to explore his home area. We're also, while in Alaska, actually going to get to meet up with Ward Hurlburt's son. For many of you who don't know, Ward Hurlburt was one of the beloved Hurlburt Room, our conference room back here. Our chapel is named after Ward Hurlburt. His son is still alive, lives in Alaska, in Anchorage. We're going to get to spend a few days with him, getting to get reacquainted and get to know him while we're there. And so there's trips like that are helping us kind of feel like we're building on top of other things. One, for instance, would be this summer, Kristen and I will celebrate our 20th anniversary, which seems like small potatoes to some of you out there. Feels pretty big to a kid and a couple of kids who got married when they were 18 and 20. To make it to 20 years feels pretty impressive. We will actually, thank you, Fred, I appreciate that. We will actually have a renewal of vows service in our hometown with our family, the people that were there. My dad's going to come up from Texas. He performed our wedding back in the day, and he's going to come up and do the vows with us again, and have a lot of friends and family there. We're actually going to send this little camera that's live streaming us right now up with Katie to live stream it and provide an opportunity for you to participate in that with us. And so you'll get information about that. It was a secret. It was supposed to be a surprise. Kristen ruined it. She can't let me keep secrets. She found out, and so we're now making it a bigger deal than it was intended to be. There's going to be invitations going out, things. But that to me mirrors this moment this summer where I get to have the opportunity to recommit myself to my marriage, recommit myself to Kristen, is going to be mirrored my first Sunday back here in the sanctuary, the first time in the pulpit, which will be the 150th anniversary of the church. I'll be back in preaching on the 150th, and on that Sunday, my intent is to get to recommit myself to this congregation. And so God has been at work through this process, we feel like, showing us ways in which this is the right time. It's the right moment. And God seems to be blessing this whole thing from top to bottom. Things that we couldn't figure out, that we kept pressing against, just started falling into place. And I'm not one to throw around the term hand of God lightly. But everything about this process has seemed to have just been held in God's capable hands. And so we're feeling like there's an opportunity for us to get away while the church is in good health and in a good place. And while we're gone, you're going to get to pray and play too. We have things like we have a Benedictine nun coming to the church to talk about how to walk a prayer labyrinth. And she's going to come do a little talk on that, and then we're going to invite whoever participates to go over to Colorado College or to the Disciples of Christ Church and do a prayer labyrinth there. There's tons of them around town, we started realizing when we started doing the research. There's going to be some nature hikes throughout the town that Sam's planning. There's going to be a reading group that's going to be reading a Eugene Peterson book. The Monday Brown Bag Bible Study plans to be one of those. I think Sharon Beckett's planning on hosting one of those reading groups. And so there'll be others that form as well to help support those pieces. Worship on Sunday will be very similar to what you're used to, only there will be someone different in the pulpit every week of the summer. We already have the entire summer lined out, and you're going to get to hear from some of the finest preachers in Colorado Springs and around the broader area. We have several of the Muskrats lined up. The first Sunday I'm gone, Kent Ingram, First United Methodist, is leaving his pulpit to come preach here. So you won't have to run home to catch Kent preach after worship is done. He'll be here that Sunday. You can just hang out here that Sunday. We'll have Reggie Fletcher, who many of you know is beloved here at First Baptist. He'll be here to preach. We'll have Jeremiah Williamson from Grace and St. Stephen's. We'll have Travis Norton from First Lutheran for a Sunday. We'll have Jennifer Holtz from First Presbyterian for a Sunday. We also have several Baptists on Camp Sunday this year. The director of our Quaker Ridge camp will be our preacher that Sunday after camp. Mike Oldham's going to cover a Sunday for us. We have Cleveland Thompson, the pastor at Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church. He may be the finest preacher in the city, I think. He's just an incredible preacher. So I'm actually really jealous that I don't get to be here and just sit in the pew with you and listen to all these great people preach. Fortunately, the live stream will capture it all. We'll have it all cataloged, and I'll be able to go back and catch it later. So worship will be filled with those kinds of activities. And then on the play end of things, we have a ton of activities for families. Some are more adventuresome. Some are fairly easy. We have a skate party one day. I know how you all want to pull out your old roller skates and show us young people how to do that. I know you're dying to. We've got a bowling party. We've got rappelling lined up. We've got rock face rappelling, and if you think you're too old, just ask Barbara Graham if it's possible. She did it 2 summers ago, I think. And we've also got escape rooms. There's also potentially going to be a movie night here in the sanctuary. And so there's a ton of opportunities to just come together as a community and play. And so we're hoping that you will take full advantage of the opportunity to pray and play this summer.
Sounds like fun. Dan, the terms of the Lilly Grant specify that you will be relinquishing all of your pastoral duties here at FBC. You won't be on call or available to members at all. So can you give us an idea of what you will be doing and why you have chosen those activities? I know you already talked about traveling to elsewhere, to Alaska and different states and going fishing and stuff. You don't really have to do on that. But I do think that one of the things that a lot of people are probably asking is, like, you do so much for us now while you're here. Who will be there for us when you're gone?
Yeah, fishing's on the mind. I wore my brown trout fish socks just for the occasion today. Is that appropriate? Should a pastor show his leg up here like that? I don't know. It will be a successful summer in my brain if I spend, 2/3 of it on a river somewhere with a fly rod in my hand. This is the challenging part. I met 2 weeks ago with my former pastor. My former pastor, Sterling Severns, is going to come out at the front end and the back end. He'll be preaching the first Sunday that we leave and the first Sunday that we return here at First Baptist, coming out from Virginia to help facilitate some conversation, to lead in worship and to send us and have us come back properly. He's done sabbatical. And we sat down for 2 days and hammered through the details of what this looks like. And he said, Dan, what do you need to be prepared for when you come back? How can you help your staff help you be prepared? And I said, honestly, I'm not worried about what happens while I'm gone. This church is going to take good care of itself. They always have. They will continue to do so. I'm not worried about that. Well, I'll be eager to hear what's happened in my people's lives. I can tell you what I'm going to be hungry for when I get back. It's just going to be able to hear what's happened in the last 3 months in your lives. And so my one request from Amelia thus far has been, will you please keep just a list of people's names and dates and what's gone on in their lives? Hospital visits, who made visits, who checked in on them, what good things can we celebrate, so that when I get back, I can have already seen all of that and get caught up. Even yesterday, Max Goodale texted me and asked that question. She asked, Dan, I assume sabbatical means a break, but what does that mean? How much of a break? The grant would stipulate, and by taking the grant, we accept some of its stipulations, that it's a complete break. That I don't answer phone calls or texts or emails while I'm gone, that it provides a real break. Why? Why would that be important? Because if you start answering texts, you start taking care of people from afar. It's too easy to slip right back into pastor mode and start trying to take care of people even when you're not here. And so it interrupts the break. It interrupts the Sabbath. I slip out of pray and play and back into work, right? And so that's what it's asking. That's what I'll be asking you all to observe, as hard as it might be, is to not reach out, but to reach out to Katie instead. And to trust her and to trust the others. Barbara Graham has already agreed to be a pastor on call for the summer. We're going to have a couple of other pastors lined up as kind of backups, like potentially Bill Wolf, who used to be the pastor at Highland Park, like Monica potentially as we need her. And so there's others that'll be lined up as kind of backup pastors on call for the summer to help us get through. But what we're asking ultimately is that you let us have that break. And then also, don't read it as I don't love you. Assume that I love you. Assume that I want to know what's going on, and that there's actually a lot of restraint happening on my end, too, to not try and get too invested in coming back too early, right? So that's really the way it will work going forward. Worship will be covered by all of these groups of preachers. Katie will be helping organize and making sure all of that's covered. On the pastoral care end of things, it will be Katie first, and then potentially Barbara Graham as our immediate backup as it relates to pastoral care. And then we'll have a few others that are lined up in case we need more hospital visits or whatever, with help in that regard. We're not anticipating a huge need for that. That's not our hope, Early on, there were conversations. It's always a difficult and touchy conversation. Who would Pastor Dan come back to do a funeral for? How do you answer that? No one, right? No one. Because if I come back for one, but I don't come back for another, what have I just communicated? Can't do it. I can't do it with a good conscience. If I come back for one, I got to come back for all of them, right? And so I need your permission, as hard as that makes it, I'm just tearing up thinking about it. As hard as that makes it for the church and for me, I need your permission to not come back for a funeral. Fred's. Thanks, Fred. Again, thanks. Fred, I feel like Fred wants me to go. Have you guys getting that feeling? All right, sorry. I hope that's enough.
All right, Dan, the church will be playing and praying alongside you during this journey. Do you anticipate us having a way to be able to communicate with each other what we're up to while you are away?
What I hope it will happen, in answer to that, I do want to know what's happened while I'm gone when I get back. I do want to hear from you about what was fun, what was meaningful. My hope is that throughout the summer, those of you who participate in some of these activities, when Reyes decides to rappel off of that rock face, I want somebody to get a video of it, and I also want to hear somebody talk about what it was like to play together on that Saturday when you guys all got together and fell off of a rock face together. Do you know what I'm saying? I want to hear. I do. I won't be reading those. I won't be seeing those in the immediate, but my hope is that you'll be sharing them with each other. If that happens on a Saturday, I hope somebody gets up here on Sunday and shares it with the congregation. You really missed out yesterday. We had this great time. 30 of us got together and jumped off a rock together, That would be a real success in my book, to hear you all share with one another how fun and meaningful it's been, and to get the chance to hear about it when I get back and catch up on things. In the immediate, unless there's something very cataclysmic, right? If there's something cataclysmic, Katie knows to reach out to me. She's the one person who should be reaching out to me in that regard. It would have to be something huge. It would have to be, I don't even know how to describe it. The roof fell in on the church. Yeah, something big enough that it would be inappropriate for me to stay away, right, at that point. We don't anticipate any of those things. But you should know that Katie would reach out to me in that situation. With the help of the leadership, she would determine what was big enough to reach out and let me know. But we're not going to worry about that because it's not going to happen. So God's hand's already been over this too much to think things like that are going to happen.
All right. Kristen's been one of your biggest supporters for the last 20 years, and now us as a church, we have an opportunity to support her. How can we best support Kristen during a sabbatical when she's here in the Springs and not with you?
Do you want to answer that? I learned about 19 and a half years ago not to speak for Kristen.
Good morning, everyone. I, first off, really appreciate all you are doing to support us through this. It's very much needed. As you know, I get most of the summer off every summer, and it's really nice because I'm always begging Dan to take 2 or 3 weeks off, and it's very rare that I get that, so I'm really excited to have the whole summer with him. Honestly, there might be 1 to 1.5 weeks where he's gone and I'm home that I'm not working. So, as much as I appreciate, you might want to reach out to me or whatever, I might need some alone time in the middle of the summer too, as well as Dan. I love him dearly, but it'll be really nice.
It's starting to sound like Fred.
But one way, Dan and I have been talking about this, and I was like, I really think, and this sounds really small, but we might need some help taking care of our yard because we'll be out of town so much. We just planted grass 2 years ago, and I really like to have my full big garden, and I didn't really want to give that up this year. In fact, I planted seeds yesterday in growing pots. So that's one way, and that'll be maybe 4 weeks that we'll be out of town, that nobody will be at our house. I think Katie's going to be with our pups while we're in Belize and Alaska. But when we're in Montana and Wyoming, there won't be anybody at our house. I'm glad this is being live streamed so that everyone will know that there's nobody at our house during that time.
Go ahead and give our address, please.
Okay, all right. But that for right now, that's all we can think of. But I do just want to express thank you for your support over the past 7 years as well, and your support going forward, and during this time that we get to play and pray together. Is that good? Okay. Oh, they clap for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Take a bow. All right, Dan, I'm sure you already know this, but I want to repeat what I've heard from so many others, and that is that our church family is in full support of this sabbatical. We look forward to having this opportunity to grow and prosper in your relationship with the Lord, and we too look forward to our opportunity to not just sit idly in waiting for your return, but to engage in the teachings and opportunities that this committee has put together for everybody. They've done a great job of planning events that will help you, help us, I should say, enhance our relationships with one another and with the Lord. So, Dan, is there anything that we can do for you before you go, while you're gone, and when you return?
Keep being you is the thing that comes to mind immediately. I, at least once a month, am on the phone with some pastor who is leaving a church because they've felt abused, misunderstood, mistreated, something that's made them want to leave their congregation. And every time I have those conversations, I walk away and I think, I've never experienced that here. Never have I experienced that here. And I'm just thankful to be a part of a congregation that I want to serve and that I love and that I have always felt has loved me well and loved Kristen well and treated us well. It's not that there's not been hardship or hard things, but I've never once felt abused. I've never once felt that you were intentionally out to get me or that you were intentionally out to get Kristen. And some of my colleagues have felt those things. And so I'm just thankful for you and the ways in which you've walked alongside us in this ministry thus far. There are a couple of things I would share with you as we move forward into this season. One is, we're about to open the floor for you to ask what questions you might have. But don't think that you can't ask questions after today. If something comes to you and you have a question about it, feel free to approach myself or one of the Sabbatical Support Team and ask those questions. We are going to have a particular page on the website that will have information relating to the sabbatical that we'll send out to you before the summer begins. Each week on that page will be posted this week's preacher and a little bio and photo of who's going to be our preacher that week. It'll have the calendar of events for you. It'll have the calendar of events for what we'll be doing in that same time frame, so you can see where we're at while you're doing what you're doing. There will also be testimonies from you as you go through the summer together. It'll be your kind of one-stop shop. This video, this live stream will be there in case you want to go back and review it later or share it with friends who are wondering about it. And so there's a lot of opportunities to still kind of plug in and stay engaged with it. As we get closer, I need you to understand that I have to start setting a few things down. Otherwise, I set you all and our staff up at the end if I get to January 5th, and then I just kind of take all of the responsibility I've been carrying and I just go, huh, and shove it off on you and walk away. We don't want that. We want this to feel like a healthy exit and a healthy reentry, which means there's a tapering on the back end or on the front end, and then as a reentry that's going to come at a tapered rate too. I can't just pick everything back up on the first day and think I'll be ready to go. We don't want to blow the sabbatical the first week I'm back, is the way Mike Oldham talks about it. He already thinks I've set myself up. He's like, Dan, really? You decided your first Sunday preaching would be the 150th anniversary? What were you thinking, I said, I'm up for it. I'll be up for anything after 3 months off. So just be aware there'll be kind of a healthy tapering on this end and on the return too, as I slowly start to try and hand responsibility over and try to make sure everyone feels good about the weight they're carrying as I leave.
Sounds good.
Does that help?
All right, guys. We have some time, so if anybody has any questions that you haven't been answered, you're more than welcome to come on up to this little microphone up here so everybody can hear it. And Dan, I'm sure, will be more than happy to answer them.
It doesn't have to be just about the sabbatical. I've got answers to everything. I'm just kidding. Kristen looked at me like, really? Really?
Ariel said you're a genius, so she believes it.
Thanks, Ariel. Thank you.
I feel so moved this morning. I've been away 8 weeks, and I walked into this church this morning and I thought, oh, what a beautiful church we have. And I was gone 8 weeks. I can't imagine how it's going to be for you, but I want you to go. I want you to love every bit of it, and we'll love having you back.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. It's good to have you back, too.
Come on, somebody else has questions.
What kind of fish are you going after?
You really want me to get into that? I could spend 30 minutes on this. Richard asked, what kind of fish I'm going after? Mostly trout. Will be anywhere where you're in the Rocky Mountain West. I'm really shooting to get trout and trout and trout. But in Belize, we'll be looking at bonefish and permit and tarpon. And tarpon can be up to 6 feet and 300 pounds. And so I'm all on the fly. I'm going to do all this on fly rod. And so that's the challenge this summer. And so I'm really hoping to get into tarpon. In Alaska, it will be big rainbows is what I'm really going for, but there's a chance of salmon. I'll be in between runs. And then there's Dolly Varden and whitefish and other things as well, grayling. So, yeah. In this one's actually pretty fascinating. In Alaska, American Baptists have historic ties to Kodiak Island. I don't know if you know this. We have a Kodiak Baptist mission there. Back when it was a territory, this is all, I got this information from Ward Hurlburt Jr. He sent me a long email explaining all this. Back when Alaska was a territory, the different denominations split Alaska up into mission areas. So the Presbyterians got this area, and the Catholics got this area, and the Episcopalians got this area, and us American Baptists, we got an island off the coast. That tells you what they thought about us. But I'll actually be on Kodiak for a week fishing in the remote part of southern Kodiak. Literally, they'll fly you in on a charter plane, and they land on the river. And then they kick you out, and you camp and fish for a week out in this tent, basically, on the edge of the river. It is a little permanent, semi-permanent structured tent where you're there with a guide. But it's the only place in the world where there are Kodiak grizzlies. And so I'll be there in the height of Kodiak grizzly viewing season. So if you want to pray specifically about that trip, pray that I only see them from a safe distance. Hartzell. Good question. Yeah. Hartzell asked, why 7 years? Why 7 years for sabbatical? It's biblical, isn't it? The seventh day is hallowed and called the Sabbath. And then later, whenever the Israelites were settling, you had in the law that every seventh year would be a Sabbath year. And on that year, you were supposed to let the soil rest. You were supposed to let it go fallow, so that it could be ready for the next season of growth, right? That's the metaphor we're leaning into here. It's holy time. Time is holy. Too often we hear time is money, but it's not right. Time is the one thing we can't buy, right? And so if we're not careful, we can move through our whole life thinking time is a commodity we get to spend. Not something we get to live into and embrace, to set apart for a blessed life, right? Those essentials, praying and playing, that you can't get paid for. And so the seventh year in biblical language is holy time. So actually, COVID threw a wrench in the machine a little bit, right? And the leadership of the church, the EC at the time, the support team at the time, had the good wisdom to step back and say, Dan, this might not be the right time for a sabbatical. You would take it in your seventh year. I've now completed my seventh year. I'm in my 8th year, so I'll be taking my sabbatical in my 8th year. That's good, sensitive leadership on the part of your leaders of your church to step back and say, this isn't right. We need to wait. We need to wait. And I'm convinced because we did, God's hallowing this time. God's making it holy. Good question, Hartzell.
Any other questions?
I don't have a quick question, but just a remark on it, Dan. First of all, thank you to the committee that put everything together. When I read all of the people who are going to be here, pretty exciting. Every single person, including Katie, I was just like, well, this is going to be cool. But I did sort of have this feeling, and I wonder what EC or the team. It's easy, even now, if I see you're not preaching, to kind of go, oh, this Sunday I'll go to Woodman Valley with my daughters, right? What should we as a congregation do to not get that feeling? Dan won't know we're not in church.
I'll know. I think there's...
Do we have to worry about us going on a sabbatical as well?
No. Okay, so I would say two things immediately, Myra. I would say... Yeah, sure. I would say a couple of things. I would say the point of this summer is for you to feel like you're on sabbatical too. So part of this would be, I would say, I would bless your opportunity to worship with your daughters a little bit more. I would also say to you, I think if you're not here, you might be missing some of the finest preaching in Colorado Springs. Now, preaching's not worship. Worship is different. Worship happens in community. The people sitting around you are your faith community. And so whenever you aren't here, your presence will be missed. But I would think that you would also crave more than just good preaching. You would crave being in the presence of your worshiping community together. Gary and I talk about this all the time, but part of what makes communion here at First Baptist so meaningful is that I pass the plate to people that I know don't necessarily agree with me theologically, but that love me nonetheless, which is unique. Not every church has that. And so there are unique things about what it means to be a part of this body that I hope you won't take for granted. I do think you're going to have a great summer of preaching, and my hope is you're going to hear you're not going to hear just Dan-style preaching, right? You're going to hear different styles of preaching with different theological preferences, different leanings, and at the end of every service, my hope is that there's a good conversation that happens about, boy, what do we take from that, or man, that was really powerful. Why does that strike me, but this other one didn't so much? My hope is that you take it as an opportunity to get to love on each other well. If it's a sermon that doesn't land well with you, I don't see that being an issue because I'm convinced we have the best preachers available to us in the city coming to preach those services that fit with us. I mean, I handpicked them, so if you don't trust them, you're not trusting me really at the end of the day. But I went out and asked specific people. I didn't just throw a random list out and say, hey, would you consider coming? I went to specific people and said, would you come fill my pulpit for a Sunday? And the excitement that came from others about the opportunity, the Lutheran pastor Travis, who is Paul Peel's replacement. I am convinced that Travis Norton is the finest pastor in Colorado Springs. I'm not saying the best preacher. He's a great preacher. I'm saying the finest pastor. Who could step into Paul Peel's pulpit, take over, and have any chance of success after 49 years of being their pastor? He's got to be the only one. I mean, this man is special. Kent Ingram was all too happy to get to come preach in the Baptist church. So I'm sure he's going to make fun of me a little bit. So you all don't want to miss that one, So I'm convinced that it will be a full, great summer of ministry, but I also don't expect you to not go on vacation while I'm away. Does that make sense? There's no expectation here that you make sure you're here every Sunday. I assume it will feel a whole lot like a normal summer here at First Baptist, which means families will be traveling. You'll be visiting with family, those types of things. We celebrate that. If I'm doing it, I hope we can celebrate that you're doing it too and call it blessed, right?
So with guest pastors coming, what does that mean for the Monday brown bag?
Monday Brown Bag becomes, good question, Lori. Monday Brown Bag becomes one of those book groups I'm recommending that throughout the summer, the church, that anyone that wants to participate, pick up a copy of Eugene Peterson's Run with the Horses. He talks about having a full life in this book, and he uses the prophet Jeremiah as a parable, for a metaphor for looking at how to have a full life in God. And over the course of the summer, I'm encouraging the church to pick one of those books up and join a reading group. The Brown Bag Bible Study on Mondays becomes one of the nucleus of one of those reading groups, and they've already unanimously thrown their support in favor of that. Yeah, good question.
Any other questions, comments?
Go for it.
Christine, you have one additional task. I need you to take a picture of every fish Dan catches so we can actually see that the size he reports is accurate.
I'm going to make sure she's conveniently not there some days.
Yeah, I don't know if it's accurate. Makes a good story, though.
That's right. That's right.
All right, well, Dan, thank you for sitting here and answering everybody's questions and giving us more information about Sabbatical. Again, for everybody else, if you guys have questions, please reach out to the Sabbatical Support Team as well as Dan. We're happy to help you, and we are looking forward to seeing some new faces on all these activities this summer as we play and pray along with Dan. Would you like to close us in prayer?
Speaking of prayer,
Yeah.
let's pray together. God, what a gift it is to be a part of a family that holds up and lifts up one another so well. To be on the receiving end of that love and that gift and trust is nothing short of miraculous, and so I thank you for them. I ask on this day that you would be with us as we leave this place and enter into worship. Help us to offer up our very best to you today, God. And then as we leave this place, to serve our world more deeply. It is in your name we pray. Amen. All right, you all, head on down to fellowship time if you'd like, or stay and linger for a little bit, and we'll see you back here in just a little bit for worship.